Welcome. Now, let's take a look at a security breach case study, and this is from the famous Home Depot 2014 breach. And in this particular breach, 56 million payment cards or loyalty cards of Home Depot were compromised, and they went out into the black market, and this happened in early September 2014. So the sequence of events was that the attackers were able to gain access to one of Home Depot's vendor environments. So this was the extranet by using a third-party vendor's logon credentials. So first they gained access to the vendor environment, which was connected to the Home Depot system. Then they exploited a zero-day vulnerability in Windows, and notice that we're referring to zero-day vulnerability here, which allowed them to pivot or move from the vendor-specific environment to the Home Depot corporate environment. And when they had exploited this vulnerability, the patch for that vulnerability had not been released by the vendor, by Microsoft. Once they were in the Home Depot network, they were able to install memory scraping or collecting malware on over 7,500 self-checkout point-of-sale terminals. And this is from Smith 2014. Okay, so they spread this malware out onto 7,500 point-of-sale terminals or computers. Now, this malware was able to grab 56 million credit and debit cards. The malware was also able to capture 53 million email addresses. So in order to gather and capture such a large amount of information, you can imagine that the malware was actually running in the Home Depot network for quite some time, maybe a few weeks or even months. Now, the stolen payment cards were then used to put up for sale and bought by carders. So carders are a part of the broker black market, and what they do is that they purchase this stolen information and stolen payment card information. The stolen email addresses were helpful in putting together large phishing campaigns because these were valid email addresses. So the phishing campaigns were launched, and this was valuable information for attackers also, which was the email addresses. Home Depot didn't have secure configuration of the software or hardware on the POS terminals, and this was one of the weaknesses that they had. There was no proof of regularly scheduled vulnerability scanning of the POS environment. And because of that, obviously there were vulnerabilities, and it was very easy to exploit those vulnerabilities. And they didn't have proper network segregation between the Home Depot corporate network and the POS network. So what we're seeing here is that in the Home Depot network, which was a retail environment, the security controls were really missing. And we've just mentioned two or three: a secure configuration, the network segregation, and there were a lot of controls that were not missing. And you can just tell that if these controls were not there, then there must have been other controls also which were not there. And one of them, obviously, we're referring to scanning. So if the POS terminals were not scanned, there could be possibly other controls which are not there. Were the antivirus is up to date? And we actually don't know at this point. So overall, several controls were missing, which reflects that there was a complete absence of a strong security culture, of a strong internal security program. The vendor management of IDs and access management was missing, and monitoring of the network was missing also. So one of the important aspects that is being referred to here is the vendor management, which is a third-party network management. And this always becomes the Achilles heel or the weak point. So, organizations sometimes organize the security of their internal network because they're directly in control of the management, but then the extranet and the vendor environment usually is the missing link and the weakness, and it's difficult to control because there's a dependency on others and other organizations, and more efforts and a different technique and a different mechanism and a different way of working is required to enable and ensure the compliance of security of your vendors. A very, very important area, and we should always take care of that. And then it's also saying here that the monitoring was missing. So, if you've missed something, you should be able to detect that through monitoring that there's a sequence of events that are happening which are not supposed to happen. That's how a security information and event management, a CM solution, which collects logs and then displays the alerts, helps us. So the complete trail of the security mechanisms was missing at Home Depot, and hence you had this huge, huge breach, which happened there in 2014. Thank you.